Welcome to What the World Needs Now, sponsored by Harmony Academy from National University. In this episode, Tom Whisinnand and Josh Monroe talk with Emily Gasca, an assistant director for multilingual learners and a member of the Harmony Academy Educator Advisory Group. Ms. Gasca shares the importance and power of being curious when building relationships with both students and the adults in their lives.
Emily, thank you for being here with us tonight. For our listeners that don't have the privilege of knowing a little bit about you, could you give us an elevator pitch? Who are you? Where are you from? And what's your role in education?
Hi, everyone. So my name is Emily Gasca, and I am an educator. I have taught kindergarten for over 13 years, and then I became an MTS lead and reading interventionist. And I am currently serving as a assistant director for multilingual learners. And I'm just a passionate educator on a mission to equip and help others just fuel their passion within them.
That's absolutely amazing. And you've had a lot of roles. How'd you get into education? Like, what was the entry point? What made you think that I want to help people out? I want to help kids out. How'd that start?
It started in high school. I went to a very special high school that allowed us to have internships. So we would intern every Wednesday, and I was actually placed in different internships all 4 years. The first year I worked at the Children's Museum in Chicago. Then I was able to work in an art gallery, and then I was able to also work and volunteer at the Circuit Court in downtown Chicago. And that's when I discovered I really enjoyed working with kids and I wanted to become a teacher. So I went to school straight out of high school and received a bilingual educator's degree. And I became a teacher assistant while I was still in school. So the last 2 years of my college, I was actually a kindergarten teacher assistant. And that's when I knew, oh my gosh, I am definitely in the right field and I can't wait to become a teacher.
Tom and I are down in Omaha, Nebraska. We've got a pretty cool children's museum ourselves. I got to guess, though, Chicago's is pretty high scaled. Is it pretty awesome?
It is. It is definitely an experience.
I bet. I don't know if you've ever been to Kansas City, but I've never been to Chicago. I imagine Chicago's probably aligned somewhere with Kansas City, where multiple stories, just tons of things for kids to do, lots of hands-on learning that's going on in those buildings.
Definitely.
And I think that that's the best way for our kids to learn is to get in there with their hands and actually get dirty with their learning, if you will. Have you had any mentors or any teachers in your past that helped develop that love for passion that children's museums do? I know for me, my 4th grade teacher, Mr. Henry, I remember nothing that he taught me, but I remember him loving me, and that's what directed me towards education. Have you ever had anybody in your line that helped you down that path?
Definitely. It was 5th grade, and I was not the best. It's not that I wasn't a reader, it's that I didn't enjoy it. So I would read because I had to. And it was my 5th grade teacher, Mr. Taylor, who was originally from Kansas City. He came to Chicago because his girlfriend at the time was studying at a university there to be an optometrist. So he came along and he decided, well, he had his degree to be a teacher, so he was our teacher for 5th and 6th grade. He truly transformed my life because every day after lunch, we would do 20 minutes of sustained silent reading, and we all had to do it. The best part was that he would sit at his desk and he would read with us. So he wasn't grading papers, he wasn't on his phone, which didn't exist back then, right? But he was leading by example. And that year is when I discovered the beautiful, beautiful world of reading. All those comprehensions, strategies came alive. I read a book. It was actually a Goosebumps book. And after that, I absolutely loved it. Right when I was getting into that and reading and enjoying and looking forward to it, there was a student who was a diverse learner and he was struggling. And I was not an A student at all. I was an average student. And he chose me to be his tutor. So instead of me reading with the rest of the class, I would sit with the student in the back and we would work from a workbook. And I was helping him through those foundational skills. Little did I know that was going to be what catapulted me to being the educator I am today, and how that's when my purpose began, through one educator who had no idea where I would be 30 years later. So I'm just grateful for that teacher, that experience. And I wish one day I could find him because he was just amazing and totally transformed my life. So everything, all the work that I'm doing was born back then. And little did I know that we would be where we are today.
That's incredible. I love the fact that like this educator modeled. It wasn't just you guys do this, you all read. I want to be up here. I'm sure he could have been great in papers, right? Like maybe checking emails, but like, no, he was there. He was present, reading with you all. I think that's super huge. I think that's something that as educators, we can't underrate, right? The power of modeling, right? The old adage of they'll hear you, but they're always watching you. I think is really, really true. How do you connect with students? So you might be out of the classroom now. When you were in the classroom, how did you connect with students? What was really important? Modeling, definitely, probably, but like, what are some ways that you related to kids?
My whole philosophy has been on ways to integrate relationship, building trust with my students and with their families. So it's getting to know the families and getting to understand the uniqueness of each family. Even if they may come from similar backgrounds, same countries, every family has different beliefs. So I always made a point to get to know my students, understand not just their behavior, but the way they thought and the way that they performed, and getting to know the parents as well and the older siblings. So making those connections, having those conversations, reaching out to parents via an online platform, making the phone calls. I found that I was still doing it up until 3 years ago, that when I was in the classroom, and even as a MTSS lead and reading interventionist, I was still calling parents, even if I was not the home room or their classroom teacher, still calling parents and just building those relationships, I think is key. And allowing the parents to know and giving them insight on how we are a team and working together and just sharing that insight with parents, because sometimes we see things from different perspectives. And if you are an educator and a mom or a dad, then you know it's different roles, right? Sometimes we need a different perspective, and it's just helping parents and finding the right way to reach each family, each student. So I think that it's knowing, getting to know them, building relationships, and also what are their learning styles? What is going to reach the student and the family, and knowing how to present that information to both families and students.
Said a lot of awesome things there. The connecting with families and building a team really is so important, because there's so many families that had a bad experience with school and can be scared of school, and just reminding them, hey, we're on your team. We're here to love your kid and be there for them as well, and for you, to help you through this, is so important for so many families. I want to ask, because when at my old school, we were an EL school. And I was only there for 1 year while we were EL before I moved buildings. But I'm just curious, I'm not bilingual, best ways for a general education teacher to make those connections authentically with families, to help their EL students grow as best they can in a language that I don't speak. How can the gen ed teachers be there to best support their EL students?
That is a great question. And I will say curiosity. So meeting students with curiosity, getting to know them without making assumptions. I've had to really work on that as well myself, because I feel like being an educator in the gen ed class as a bilingual teacher and also as a neurodivergent educator, I kind of was in the role of, I do not have a background. I don't have a degree in diverse learners, but I had so many students with diverse learners who were diverse learners, and their needs were so high. So I had to find ways of incorporating possibly sign language for my nonverbals. I had to find ways to be able to reach my kinesthetic learners, there might be other ways to incorporate or strategies, but a lot of the things that we are already doing is just incorporating that into our everyday lessons and reaching our students and finding what is going to get the message across, right? Because ultimately, visuals and using TPR, which is total physical response, using the body, like for vocabulary, it's things that sometimes, especially as a primary kindergarten teacher with that background, we do naturally. So I think that sometimes just looking through the different strategies of what you already do, self-reflecting and being curious when you notice a student response, and just keeping in mind, okay, this works for this student, and also incorporating small groups. It's really hard for any educator to teach all of your classroom with the one size fits all. So it's making sure that you get to know your students, using that data to identify the weaknesses and how you're going to reach them, and doing it with in a small group setting and incorporating those different modalities.
Curiosity is such a powerful, I think, avenue to learn, and incorporating that into relationships and understanding that school is not one size fits all. And I think like primary education, right? Pre-K, kindergarten, first grade, we kind of let them play a little bit. We can kind of watch and learn. And then I think somewhere, I don't know exactly where, but man, it really gets back into that one size does fit all. Or if you don't fit into this, then something is different about you, and you have to fit into our mold, instead of how can we help you be the best human that you should be, right? I think we're missing something in education sometimes when the round holes don't fit the square pegs in. But thanks for bringing up curiosity. I think that goes a long way with adults too. And you're in an adult role now, dealing with adult leaders and adult learners. Is there a big difference between adult learners and children?
Yes and no, right? It's also like showing up curious, getting to know and understand why our behaviors are a certain way, and then helping educators kind of unfold all those layers. I've been doing a lot of reading and research on how we become the educators that we know, what we had growing up. That's why the narrative is the way it is, and the shifts are so challenging in education, because we are it's been years and years of that model of one size fits all. And now, as we're seeing all the research and how our students' brains function and develop, it's kind of challenging, because we have to be able to reach so many high demands, and they're all different. So I think that, yes, that is how we have to show up.
I'm curious, as we talk about the importance of meeting children where they are and making sure that we don't have these peg holes that we want every kid to fit into. You mentioned that you're a neurodivergent educator and person. So am I. I have ADHD. That's why I'm sitting here like messing with this. Like, it just helps me focus. But I was that kid in school that got in trouble, not because I wanted to be naughty, but because I couldn't sit still. So when I had to sit there for 7 hours a day and do worksheet after worksheet, I mean, I was bound to get in trouble, because I'm going to talk to my friends. And if you're not going to let me talk, I'm going to cause a little bit of a scene. And I think that has helped me as I teach in my classroom to understand some of the differences that my kids have and the needs that they have. It's one reason that I set a timer on my phone for every 15 minutes. Like, hey, that timer goes off when moving. And I don't care if it's just you're switching partners or seats or something. Like, get up and get your brain moving. Have you seen that in your life and in your role, whether it was in the classroom or the role that you have now, where the neurodivergent part of you brings huge benefits to the people that you're around?
Yes, for sure. As Tom was asking, there really isn't much different, because when it comes to like working with students and working with educators and trying to share or equip them with the tools that they need to be successful, I incorporate a lot of the things that I want them to take back into their classrooms. So it's leading by example, and it's walking them through those strategies and having them actually try them out and then be able to go and apply them. And as you mentioned, even as adults, like, all of that is so important, because our brain cannot receive so much information. Like, after 20 minutes, we're checked out. We're done. Yeah. So it is definitely something that I have been able to apply when it comes to giving a workshop or presenting for professional development in front of 15 plus educators, 30, depending on the size of the group. But it's being able to incorporate the turn and talk, the total physical response, using your body, and just getting up and just sharing with others. And it's key to be able for us to do the work that we do.
It is, incorporating differences and giving people different tools to work with different kinds of people is is ultra important. I'd imagine you have to stay kind of positive and upbeat when you're presenting to people and sharing new ideas that maybe they're a little bit reluctant to adopt or see the value in. How do you stay positive when times are tough? Are there books you read? Are there authors that you really love? Are there speakers that you listen to? Give us some golden nuggets here.
Yes, there is her name is Elena Aguilar. She has the book Coaching for Equity. She's got a few different books, but she has been one that has really helped me remind myself and kind of like giving you a framework to helping educators when we're facing resistance, when we're working with a group of others. And she really helps us understand that this isn't the work. The work isn't like personal. The work is helping the other person kind of get to the root cause, or what is the underlying reason for them to kind of have maybe a belief or to operate in a certain way. So she gives you a really good framework to kind of help educators walk through that and see beyond the perspective. But she has a lot of good books. She has a podcast. She has a lot of resources on her website. But she's one of my most go-to and one of my favorite authors.
Has there ever been a time where you've kind of lost that inspiration that sparked the fire that you take with you? I know there's been, after 13 years, multiple times where there's days that are harder, but there's also weeks and years where I just feel a little bit worn down. And if you've ever experienced that, do you have any advice for educators that might be facing that, or for our new educators that are getting ready to go into the field of education? How can they best equip themselves so that their fire doesn't dwindle and it stays lit? Do you have any advice for them?
Yes, I would say you really have to pour into yourself. Take some time to do something you enjoy. For me, it's reading and journaling. I love to do that. So that's making sure that I do that every day, because we're also a lot of educators. Sometimes we could also be wives, mothers, husbands, spouses, like parents. So the roles can both kind of feel a little overwhelming sometimes. So it's just making sure that we take time for ourselves, coffee date with yourself or with friends, depending on what you need in the moment, and also being a part of a community that gets you. I find that in education, sometimes we can go to maybe venting or complaining even sometimes. And it's okay in a time and a place for that, but it's making sure that you release, you let out what you need to be let out, but then you have that thought partner that's going to remind you of your why. You have your thought partner that's going to remind you of the purpose that you have in your life, and that you are doing this for a bigger reason, and you're part of something, you're the bigger picture of education and shifting the narrative and the trajectory of our students' lives. So it's being able to pour into yourself and also being part of a community and having a thought partner that's going to help you take action and figure out whatever needs to get figured out. I find that a lot of times we get to those points in our lives because of the high demands, maybe from like administrators, and sometimes the paperwork and all of the things. And sometimes it feels like we're testing after testing after testing. Like right now, I feel that is one of the seasons we are in education, where it's like first it's ACTS, then you're taking these national assessment. Then we have the state of bilateral. So we have like back to back to back, and what seems into like from January all the way to March. So there is certain periods in everybody's district where it just can become overwhelming, and it feels like I'm not even teaching. All I'm doing is testing. So it's just taking that time.
Taking that time, super important. And finding your community, I think, is absolutely paramount, right? Like everybody has somebody they can call and tell, this is a bad deal, this is a bad time. But finding those people who constantly, Darrell Williams, we had him on a couple weeks ago. He said, surround your people. You're going to need to be pushed. Sometimes you're going to need some people to pull you. You're going to have some people surrounding you to make you the best version of yourself that you need. So finding those communities, finding those like-minded educators,
and making sure that your cup's filled.
Mm-hmm.
Right? You mentioned that as well. I think that was something that I really struggled with as I was early in my career, as I was taking stuff home, and I thought everything had to be graded, and I thought that it had to be graded the next day and handed to them, or they weren't going to care. And it took me a while to realize, one, not everything needs to be graded, but two, it's okay to leave school at school. Like having boundaries is important, and it's a way to take care of ourselves. One of the best pieces of advice that I ever got was there's always tomorrow, right? Whatever you've got, it's not going away. So spend that time with your kids, with your wife, with your husband, with who you need to spend time with when you get home. It'll be there tomorrow.
I agree.
Emily, how familiar are you with the Harmony curriculum from National University?
So I'm familiar with it. We started using it at our school during the pandemic, and I loved the different features because I feel like that was one of the only curriculums that I had that was actually fully laid out for me. And it was available in Spanish. And I was able to teach my students, having them listen through the stories, doing the activities, and also having it available in Spanish. So it was like a double for one because my students were able to listen to it in their native language, and then they were also receiving some of the EL components in English instruction. And what I loved about it was the different topics and the themes that it had, and how, since it was remote learning, families were able, or like parents, whomever was at home with the students, they were able to listen in and hear the message and also be able to learn along with their students and apply it. It really helped build that community for us, for my classroom that year. And it shows. As I was in the school building and seeing them as third graders this year, it showed how much the foundations for social emotional learning has helped my students throughout their academic career. And it was then when I started using the Harmony that I was able to see how important social emotional learning is. And I wasn't just doing it during the 15 or 20-minute lesson, 30-minute lesson. I was able to incorporate the components in every content area, whether it was English or Spanish. And I just love how flexible the curriculum was, and that I was able to apply it in every different aspect, and just the impact that it made. Social emotional learning is so important. And through that curriculum, I was able to see it's not just follow the curriculum and that's it. I'm going to be able to apply this with every different lesson, every different conversation, and reminding my students, remember in the story where talking about the characters and what happened during that lesson.
One thing that I really like about Harmony is that when I first started using it, before I used it, let's go there. Before I was using it, I was very much this is my morning meeting time, and this is where we will talk about how we can be a good friend, kind of a teacher. And Harmony really taught me how to expand that out farther than just the 15 minutes that you have in morning meeting. It helped me to plant it into my math time, or to my reading time, or my writing, where we're doing low risk activities. And then they build into those academic core areas, and students have that confidence to enter those high risk areas because of the environment that's been set up throughout the whole day, not just in those 15 minutes.
I love how you pointed that out because it's so true. It really did impact their confidence level and their boldness and their ability to kind of show up and make mistakes and not feel bad, not feel embarrassed. That is key.
I think having low risk activities to start, and then building the academic knowledge from there, and getting them used to making mistakes and getting them used to failing around other people, right? As humans, we fail all the time. And the successful people have a way to understand that a failure is just a little blip in the big screen of things, and they move on with it. At the end of every episode, we always ask what the world needs now. Back in the 60s, there was the song, and Josh and I sometimes sing, but tonight might not be one of those nights. Emily, it can be academic, it can be school-based, it can be something else. What does the world need now?
Love. I think we need to show up with love and not anything else, but just showing up with love and loving others for who we are, and yeah, showing up with love.
It's always something that the world can use more of. Thanks for being with us tonight, for sharing some wisdom, reminding us of the importance of being there and loving kids, not just in those 15 minutes that we start our day with, but being able to incorporate it in all areas of a full day and showing up for kids.
And being curious.
And being curious.
Thank you so much. And thank you to Harmony. So grateful for this community. So thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, that's our show. We're so thankful and appreciative that you took your time to listen to Emily Gasca on What the World Needs Now, sponsored by Harmony Academy from National University. Please be sure to follow What the World Needs Now on Apple Podcasts or wherever you download your podcasts. We hope that as you head out, you remember that the biggest factor that plays into student success is you. Your love, your passion, your empathy, your dedication is exactly what the world needs now. Thank you for all you do. Have a good one.